You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Typhoon Yagi reaches Vietnam, with landfall expected in the next few hours. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for September 7th. Another live tropical weather bulletin tonight as we watch Typhoon Yagi get closer to reaching the coast of Vietnam on what would be a historic landfall. No Category 3 storm has ever made landfall on the Gulf of Tonkin side of Vietnam, and this could well be the first. Not even the great 1881 typhoon that hit Haiphong. Day 99 of the Atlantic hurricane season, 5 areas of interest still active. We've given moderate chances to 2 of them. The one there in the northwestern Gulf, I think the National Hurricane Center just went 50% on that, and another one in the central Atlantic. Day 116 in the Eastern Pacific, we have dropped that Central Pacific system at last, and 30% chance now for another area of interest that could develop next week in the Far East there, near the Gulf of Tonkin. Well, in the Western Pacific, Yagi of course still holding quite strong indeed. 60% to its east, 80% down towards the Micronesian islands now, and ex-Leapy. Hainan has finally been scrubbed. And in the North Indian Ocean, we have one area of interest still right now in the Bay of Bengal. 30% chance, a system that's going to be lingering for quite some time, and we're still unsure whether it's going to actually make progress or not. And in the Southwest Indian Ocean, it's all quiet here, although an interesting looking system there over the Seychelles, but certainly nothing expected here in the next 7 days. 1 or 2 little rumblings of a surface low in the central part of the ocean from GFS model, but not much else. Live look at Yagi. It is 75 kilometers from Quan Lan Island in Halong Bay, 119 from Halong itself, 146 from Haiphong, 237 from Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam, and 307 from Vinh further south. Red typhoon warning still in effect for northwestern Hainan and also for parts of southern China, including Fangchenggang towards the coast, towards the border with Vietnam. Well, that's our YouTube page, and this is a live view of what the Western Pacific is looking like right now. My name's Nathan Foy here in the studio for another hour of discussion on this and every other system that's out there right now. Of course, the main story is Yagi. No storm has ever made landfall in this part of the Vietnamese coast at anything higher than Category 2 status. And as I was alluding to, even the great Haiphong typhoon of 1780, that was another storm, of 1881, which killed about 23,000, was a borderline Category 3, had weakened to a Category 2 by the time it hit land. But with this system, we're currently giving a 64% chance of a Category 3 landfall, and with it being so close at hand, it looks like that is going to happen. At the moment, we're giving it a wind speed of 120 miles per hour sustained and an estimated central pressure of around 941 millibars. Zooming in, looking at the storm in greater detail here, and let's try and add an overlay showing some of the infrared too. What you will notice on this loop when it starts animating is that the eye is disappearing, but the cloud tops encircling it have gotten a bit stronger. You can see it there. Maybe not quite as impressive on this imagery as some of the others that I've been looking at lately, but you can see that the storm is still holding pretty steady, pretty firm, and I reckon unless it really collapses right now, it will probably still be a Category 3 when it makes landfall fairly soon. Its current movement speed is something like 11 miles per hour, and at that current speed and its current direction, it's going to make landfall very close to Haiphong at this rate in approximately, I'm just trying to figure this one out, maybe 8 hours or less. You may remember on last night's tropical weather bulletin when we said it would be 8 hours at the current speed until its landfall in Hainan. Well, the storm actually sped up a little bit there and actually did it in, I think, maybe 6 hours. So there is always that chance that the storm will speed up once again and get there a little bit sooner than the extrapolated forecast. So my name's Nathan Foy in the studio. I'm also joined by Jack tonight, one of our esteemed members. Hello, Jack. Welcome to the stream. And what's your take on Yagi as we look at it today?
Hi there. Well, obviously, I haven't seen much of Yagi since it was peaking, but I know that this is a very dangerous situation currently impending for the northern coast of Vietnam. And I did look earlier, said just a complete random fact. 5 meters of storm surge in some areas along the coast, which is pretty solid. But
yeah, that's a pretty high amount. That's probably about a high-end Category 4 storm surge, if that's true.
Yeah, that's why I was pretty confused.
In fact, it may even be a Category 5 storm surge, but we don't have official categories for storm surge. But usually those numbers, we get numbers that are consistent with varying strengths. Of course, this storm being a former borderline Category 5, it's carrying along that storm surge with it. There's quite a lag effect. Whether the storm reached Category 5 or not, I think most people would say yes. And in our reanalysis just a little bit ago, we actually, operationally, we didn't actually put the storm as a Category 5, but we have reanalyzed that to be the case that it reached 160 miles per hour at about midnight local time on the 6th is when it would have happened. So that's our stance on it right now. You'll see on that right-hand panel there the JTWC's forecast, and they've gone very bold prediction in forecasting a Category 4 secondary peak there, reaching 130 miles per hour once again as it makes landfall very close to Haiphong there. That would be extraordinary if the storm managed to do that. Looking at it right now, though, I don't think it will. I think it's going to hold fairly close to what it's currently at, and we're probably going to be seeing still a formidable Category 3 landfall, especially given the history of the area in that it hasn't actually happened before, at least to our knowledge. Certainly not in modern records, and certainly not in the semi-modern records back to 1884. It is an extremely powerful storm. It's done what very few other storms they will do. A little caveat to that record breaker watch. Of course, we also talk about Typhoon Ramazan, which was very similar to this storm. It did, I think, still made a Category 4 landfall, but it was just over the border into southern China. So if we're talking regional, it's not the first storm to make a landfall of this intensity in the Gulf of Tonkin, but it is in Vietnam. So just to clarify all of that there. We're also joined by Maury right now as well. Maury, your thoughts on the storm? I assume, in fact, both of you, Maury and Jack, you reckon it reached Category 5 status, I assume?
I reckon it reached 160 miles an hour, yes.
Yes, I do think it did manage to achieve Category 5 status. At landfall, that is unlikely. It does seem like...
Oh, no. It definitely weakened before the landfall.
Yes, yes, which is typical with these systems. But of course, this is still a system to watch, even if it is no longer a Category 5 and now only a Category 3, especially the impacts that will cause on Vietnam. Uh, I do understand why the JTWC is going for Category 4, and it definitely still is a possibility from now until then. I'm just not sure if that's the likelihood, because that would be extremely rare. But this system has already been very close to beating records, or beaten some records, in fact. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible for it to do what to do the very unreal, I guess you could say, possibility of it making a Category 4 landfall in Vietnam. But I just don't think that's the most likely possibility. I think most likely it'll just sustain at intensity. I don't think it will weaken because the sea surface temperatures are still warm enough to sustain the system, but I don't think it will strengthen either.
We're looking at live radar imagery right now as well. I got to add a little disclaimer on this one as well, in that they're all the radars that have been mashed together here, they aren't aligned properly. So if you look carefully, you can see several eye walls. There is only one, trust me, and just try and focus on one of them there. It's all showing, all different radar sites showing the same thing, but it's just sort of juxtapositioned pretty poorly. So you can see that certainly the southern rim of the eye is looking good. Northern side might have a weakness there, but once again, it's hard to tell for sure looking at that radar mess. But clearly, the storm getting closer to land, obviously, and the more hefty parts of the outer and eventually inner eye wall is starting to reach the coast now as well. Now, this storm will also be a substantial rainmaker. We are expecting over 8 inches of rainfall over a wide swathe of northern Vietnam and southern China. That would amount to over 200 millimeters of rain, and possibly much higher in local areas. We have also, because there's no real formal warnings in these areas, we've unofficially drawn a box. You can see it on our automated stream. I'm just wondering if I can bring it up. It would be very useful if we could, so that I could actually show you what we're talking about. I am working on that right now, and in just a sec, hopefully you'll be able to see something, but everything's broken down here, so I guess not. But I want to tell you that Hanoi, we have currently put inside a typhoon warning, just about. And obviously the other cities, Haiphong and Halong, also under that as well. I think we can show it now. This is the shapes that we've drawn on the map here. This is a mock-up of what we expect it to look like using the sort of the National Hurricane Center's guide. So the hurricane warning equivalent there in the red, typhoon warning, and in the orange there for tropical storm force winds. So those are the areas that we're most concerned about right now. As we mentioned before, there are still red typhoon warnings in effect. That's the highest level in China for northwestern Hainan and for that south coast part of the Gulf of Tonkin as well. So cities like Belhai, Kinzhou and Fangchengang, getting closer to the border with Vietnam, up to the border, and then over in Vietnam we expect typhoon conditions extending along the coast and as far south as getting close to that river opening there. And apologies for my lack of local geography as to the name of that river. It's the one that flows right through Hanoi, but in the general area of Nam Trinh, I think it is. Yeah, Nam Trinh, just north of that river outlet. is where we've drawn the line for typhoon conditions. So that's what we're expecting with Yagi. We're nearly in the final stages of this storm, obviously, but that doesn't mean that the threat of it is any much more diminished, of course, until it actually moves inland. Once it does move in, all the models are forecasting really rapid weakening, and by the time we get to the end of the weekend, it looks like Yagi will be no more. Maury, you're looking at that radar as well right now. I don't suppose you've got any thoughts that you want to share?
I mean, I'm looking at the eyewall now. I noticed that the northern side is a little bit weaker, which has always been the case. I noticed the last time I was on a live stream for Yagi, we did forecast that it wouldn't go away, that northern weakness, and it hasn't. At least I think we forecasted it, and I don't know if that's prohibiting the storm from growing stronger. It probably is, but or it's a sign that the storm isn't getting stronger. But either way, the storm still, we have to focus on the southern side of it. We have to focus on the cities on the southern side.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah.
I do still think that places in China along the Gulf of Tonkin are worthy of typhoon warnings due to those outer bands. However, really, the most intense conditions will really be south of the main eye. It will likely be south, probably towards Namdin. I think I'm saying that correctly. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Two of the things I wanted to mention about that. First of all, absolutely, the southern side is definitely packing a punch. Look at the amount of cloud tops there that are really blowing up into the -90s in some areas. Northern side really not up to scratch in comparison. The eye is filled in those latest frames, by the way. But number two here is, I think that the storm is still moving further south than expected. At this rate, Haiphong will enter the eye, and Hanoi might as well, unless we see a last-minute shift northwards.
I just elaborate on from anything I said earlier with the storm surge.
Yes.
So that storm surge, from anywhere where this storm makes landfall, anywhere north, anywhere around 30 miles north, 40 miles north of where this storm makes landfall is predicted to reach at least 4 meters of storm surge, which is pretty phenomenal, to be fair, for Cat 3.
And especially given consideration that these are some fairly low-lying areas, at least among the immediate coastline. People talking about other Category 3s that have made landfall in Vietnam. Like I said at the top here, that this would be a formidable scenario if it does make a Category 3 landfall here. It hasn't happened before, not even the well-studied and famed typhoon, the Haiphong typhoon in 1881, one of the deadliest storms in this area. But it would be only the 8th Category 3 to make landfall in Vietnam. None of those recent storms actually did it. Storms that we were watching, like Malawi and Vamco, they weakened quite substantially just before making landfalls. They didn't make Category 3 landfalls. The last storm to actually do it, what were we saying it was, Jack? It was Zach, wasn't it? In
1995, I believe it was Category 3 at landfall. But it did not hit northern Vietnam, it hit southern Vietnam on the bend.
And interestingly, there was a spate of Category 3 landfalls in central Vietnam there, because there was one in 1993, one in two of them in the 80s as well. So since then, there actually hasn't been any, which is quite staggering, really, even though we had some very close calls. But strong impacts, of course, we've had in the last few years in this region. But this one is pretty far north.
Yeah, and that also, it might also, is the northern area of Vietnam less hilly than the southern area, or is it the opposite? I'm just wondering.
Well, certainly the very southern part of Vietnam is all low-lying. The northern part, I mean, the area around Hanoi and Haiphong, all that kind of area, I think is quite low. More you move inland, obviously it's getting hillier. Of course, you go far west enough, then you end up in the sort of foothill areas of the eastern Himalayas. So that's why this storm will weaken very quickly when it moves inland, because the altitude will be increasing. And just because it's over a pretty large area of land with no real outlet. Still, I'm quite surprised as to how quickly the models have it weakening. It's certainly been a very resilient storm so far. We've seen before storms that have hit Hainan completely collapsing. This one's still holding on, just one category below what it was before, when other storms may have lost 2 or even 3 categories. So Yagi still doing decent. We'll come back to it, of course. Let's talk about what else is going on in the tropics. This is the Atlantic Ocean, and I believe, guys, the National Hurricane Center have gone for a 50% chance, and that's that northwestern Gulf system, if I'm not mistaken. A little bit of a circulation, low-level circulation, starting to appear here, but the upper levels still don't look very good. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm currently looking at the models for that system. It does seem like that does have a decent chance of developing. Let me just move into
Alright, no,
that.
pardon me. They've completely changed it. They've not gone for this at all. They've actually scrubbed this system. They're down to 2 AOIs, and it's the southern system, the one we've been watching the whole time in the Caribbean, is now what they're lending their support to. I wondered whether they might do that. So what we're looking at is some of this cloud cover here over the northern Yucatan moving into the Gulf, and now they've put their eggs into this basket, fully on board in this AOI's camp, on it becoming potentially a tropical cyclone. 50%. Really intrigued to see that they've removed 2 other areas of interest in the process. They've only got 1 out there now in the open Atlantic, and that's a 20% chance at the 8 p.m. update. So this is what we're looking at, that convection over there. So, Maury, with that in mind, update there, what do you think now?
Okay, well, I see what you mean. Basically, it's a completely different system that has the more likely chance of developing than what was initially expected. And
Yep.
I see the remnants of that other system. It's currently towards the southeast of Texas, but really it's just going to cause some strong gusts on the coast and not really much. However, I do think that the system behind it actually has a decent chance of developing more quickly, especially given the slightly warmer sea surface temperatures there, and also the higher oceanic heat content.
Which system?
This new system.
There isn't a new system, or current systems.
No, well, basically the system that they've
Over the
given a
Yucatan.
50% chance.
Yeah, that's the one we've been tracking ever since the main development region, the one that we were thinking would become a hurricane before reaching Les Antilles, failed, flunked through the Caribbean, flunked out of that as well. And maybe now it's going to be time for this system to actually form.
Oh, wait, I think I get it. I think I get it. So there was another system that developed that we thought was going to develop instead of the system that we've been tracking all along the Caribbean. And now we've given up on that system and we've moved back to the system that's moved through the Caribbean.
Yeah, pretty much. Certainly a big shield of cloud moving across the southern United States right now as well. So that other little system that's now been reduced to naught from the National Hurricane Center will be producing significant rainfall amounts across the Gulf Coast states. Now look further north, you can see this system too. This is another former area of interest. It's clearly not tropical or no chance of being subtropical or tropical now. So it's an extratropical storm moving up towards the Canadian Maritimes. It does have storm force winds. It will produce gale force winds in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So obviously interest up there. Keep watching for that one. It is on its way. And then out over the main Atlantic, there's still a little bit of cloud over there on the left-hand side. And I think what they're tagging now is going to be from this, I think. This is the one that we've tagged at possibly 40%, but they're giving it 20. And still another system possibly to the east, but not much firing up over there. And then next week, there could be another system moving off the coast of Africa that we're also closely watching. So will the Atlantic be about to wake up? It's probably the best chance it's going to have this season. It is peak season. Historic average peak day is coming up in just 3 days now as we enter the 7th. So it is definitely prime time for the Atlantic, but will it respond? You can also see down... Go ahead.
One thing I am noticing, though, on some of the models, it is actually pointing to, I believe it's Invest 90L now, that would become a hurricane. Some models are pointing at that. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, obviously, but I'm guessing that is unlikely due to the limited amount of time it will be over the ocean. But if it can just move slower, then it could possibly intensify into a Category 1 hurricane like we were initially forecasting over the Caribbean.
Wow.
But I'm not sure if it's going to move that slowly. I mean, how much is it moving right now?
You're talking about the Gulf, right?
Yeah, the Gulf system.
Well, I mean, it's not moving very much at the minute. I don't know. But East Pac still, there's a chance that something will form in the next few days over here as well. Some clouds blowing up over Guatemala at this point, moving out over the East Pac. Keep watching that area. Let's switch to GOES 18, give you a quick look at the beautiful blue marble there, the Pacific Ocean. You can see something happened here. We were looking at a little area of interest. It's not there anymore. I think Hone is this thing here, but we have, at least on our books, we have finally dropped it now. As a remnant low, so Hone is now completely no more. We were still tracking it as a remnant low until now. But that is everywhere else in the tropics, but of course the main story is Yagi. Zoom out to the West Pac here. Again, huge chunks of convection all around the Philippine Islands. Still looking at some training rainfall along that western coast of Luzon, which could still produce more very heavy rainfall for that area. Leapy, what's left of it? Well, it looks post-tropical. It probably is. There it is, moving up northeastwards, getting swept up quite quickly now. And then down here, we are still really looking for, could it be this that becomes that system that we're tracking? I think it may be. Still potential threat for Guam, potential threat for the Mariana Islands, the rest of the islands, as we enter next week with this potential storm forming. Models have been flip-flopping a little bit. They've gone anywhere from a quite powerful typhoon making landfall on one of the islands to a more sedate scenario of a weak to moderate tropical storm. I believe the latest from the GFS is a Category 1 reaching Guam, actually. So that's something else that it looks like we're going to be watching as we enter next week.
Nathan.
Yes.
I just want to say, back to Yagi.
Yeah.
Only 12 hours ago, they were expecting this storm to be a Category 1 right now and make landfall as at that status. So
Who was?
storm, a lot of people. I'm seeing this 12 hours ago. AccuWeather.
Oh dear.
What else?
Well, I think
Yeah,
that was a mistake. Even
JMA apparently. What?
true. Even back then, I think it should definitely have been at least a Category 2. And I wasn't sure what to forecast myself, but we pretty much went with Category 2 for the landfall and still inferring that on our forecast. But it looks like here it may well be a Category 3 landfall. The eye is continuing to disappear. Whether it will come back again before the landfall is a big question mark. But certainly, according to some comments and from what we've been hearing from people on the ground in Vietnam today, is that things are getting pretty heavy right now. We might have an opportunity to take some comments and questions then. Start your message with Force 13 all in text and we can have a chat right now. Ghost says, when's the Iona t-shirt dropping? We're not doing that, guys. We're not doing any more of that stuff. Not unless we end up waiting like 4 or 5 years for that storm, and then we might do it when we're way out into the future. Do we think it'll still... Okay, Atlantic question. Do we think it will still reach the prediction that the National Hurricane Center put just a few months ago? Well, that was the NOAA, which of course is above the Hurricane Center. Their prediction, gee, I can't remember what their prediction was now, but it was quite active, wasn't it? Something like 20 storms?
Yeah, somewhere around 20. I think it was like 19 to 23, something like that. Maybe a little lower.
Well, it doesn't look like we're going to get to 20 storms in the Atlantic. We revised our predictions down at the start of the month to 17. So that's currently what we're saying. And that actually answered Stanley's question from earlier as well as to whether we're lowering our numbers. We are... we're not factoring in forecasts for our updated numbers. We're just going by what we expected would happen month by month, and we fell short by at least 2 storms in August, so we've dropped it by, I can't remember if we had 19 before or 20. It was 2 or 3 storms that we've dropped the forecast by. Conversely, in the Western Pacific, we've raised our expectations there. We are now, gee, I can't find that slide, but I think we are now expecting 25. Yes, 25 named storms is the expectation now for the Western Pacific. I think last time it was 22. SRB 13 says, isn't Hanoi near the Yagi's track? Would it be affected by typhoon force winds? So yes and yes to that. It does look like, especially since it is showing no real signs of moving further north here, that Yagi may well pass very close to Hanoi, still as probably a Category 2 typhoon. Usually the strongest winds are on the northeastern side, or maybe northwestern in this case. I'm not sure how it's going to be when it moves inland. Obviously, given the shape of the coastline, those winds might go down quite quickly, so it may well be the south side that has the strongest winds by the time the storm reaches Hanoi. And it sure looks at the moment as though Hanoi will get the southern side, if not the eye itself. Another comment in the Western Pacific. Do we think we will see another Category 5 in this season? I think it is very likely. I would say that at this point, any season, to be honest. We have seen massive typhoon beasts that form in October, November, even one or two in December. So we still have a long way to go. It may well be a backloaded season where we get some really strong typhoons. Indeed, even that next one on the forecast could be one of those. Where and when did Yagi make landfall? Well, I assume you're talking about yesterday or early hours of today. Yesterday morning, afternoon, I can't remember exactly when it was now. But the landfall occurred quite close to the eastern tip of Hainan, to the northeast of Wenchang. Then it moved pretty much directly over Haikou, the significant largest city on Hainan, and back out over the Gulf of Tonkin. Did you want to say something there, Jack?
The landfall was the 6th of September 2024 at 7:21 Z. That was the exact time of landfall.
So
in Hainan.
20 past 4 in China, I think it was. Afternoon time, anyway, is when it arrived there. And, of course, local time in Vietnam, Indochina time, getting up towards 8 a.m. at this time. Mike says, do you think we'll have an extremely powerful storm like Haiyan in the Western Pacific this year? Well, it can never be ruled out. Of course, Haiyan was really something special. It doesn't really feel like a 2013 vibe this year to me. So I don't see a Haiyan, but I think we could certainly see one or two, at least one or two more Cat 5s. We're still looking at this live imagery here along with the latest JTWC forecast cone. In just a second we will be going on to the models, so I'll take some more questions. Day 3, according to the icon, is going to be a brief hurricane off the Texas-Louisiana border. Wow, is it really? Well, the icon is certainly going out on a limb with that one. Jack, Maury, whilst we wait for the models to arrive here, any other things you'd like to bring up?
Well, I do want to mention what the icon is saying.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that's going to be scenario. It doesn't look like it makes landfall as a hurricane. Yeah, it is a little weird. Here, let me zoom in on it a little bit. Let me just move to... Yeah, there we go. Now, I'm not even sure
if... Just go from the beginning. How does it form?
Okay, so it forms...
It's from the southern system.
Yeah, it is from the southern system. Wait.
It is?
Yeah, I just don't know why it's off the coast of Texas initially. Or I think I'm tracking the wrong system.
Wait.
It's down here, down by the Yucatan Peninsula.
Look, it's a big mess here. These two systems tangling up. That actually is the northern one that begins there. It dips south, then it's sort of, I don't know, that other low pressure becomes part of it in some way, and off it goes back north. It
seems like they merge together. It seems like the low pressure systems merge together, or one of them absorbs one another. I think it's the northern one that absorbs the southern one. Then it moves north again. I don't think it quite reaches hurricane status, though. It looks like a tropical storm. I'm not sure if that's hurricane status. That's about 50 knots. So let's say about 60 miles per hour.
Okay.
And it weakens before landfall. Probably is around 45 miles per hour as it makes landfall near Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Still a fascinating forecast right there.
Yeah, I don't think the steering currents would allow that to occur, but
It seems like a crazy track, that's for sure.
yeah, I think it most likely will go into the coast of Mexico or maybe the far southern edge of Texas, not Louisiana.
Okay. Well, that's the icon model. Let's take a look at what the GFS has for us today then, as we look at the model runs. So, again, you can see that northern system, National Hurricane Center, have given up on it. And this other system, which is about to emerge off the Yucatan into the Bay of Campeche. Which one will win? There they both go. And it becomes a massive mess, just like the icon, and then I don't know which one wins there. If either of them do, it just eventually they just end up being together into this one system. Then it's a tropical storm. There it goes. So decent model support on this, but it's just a brief one, making landfall in Tamaulipas, Mexico, and then does it try and round the corner there as well? Something trying to get off the end of that, near Houston and Galveston. Very small system, but then it's dead. So interesting scenario right there. Let's check those systems in the main development region. So the middle one, well, one in the middle of the ocean, well, actually, it doesn't become the dominant system. It's the one to its east that we're still monitoring near Cape Verde that overtakes it. And then that they sort of end up together as well. And another system behind that, that's the one that we're also watching, that will be moving off the coast of Africa. And then they're both active. Possibly both, yep, both tropical storms there at the same time. And the one leading the way becomes a hurricane, recurving. And then the one behind it shrivels up and dies off and then gets sucked into it as that other system becomes a major hurricane at sea. And that takes an erratic track as well. Look at that. It does a very large loop and then back westwards at the very end of that run. Of course, this last frame is 16 days out, which is very long in terms of our forecasting capabilities. So, again, take that with a big dose of caution. But no big land impacts on that model run. EastPac looking out for that other system. There it is, trying to form along the coast of Mexico, really struggling all the way there. And actually a second system entering the fray. There it is, only a brief tropical storm in fact, and the first one actually does fail in the end. It never becomes a tropical cyclone. And that second one does instead, for a brief tropical storm. There's that little thing we were tracking in the Central Pacific. It's game over for that system now. And then, of course, we've got Yagi. I mean, from a forecasting point of view, there's not much else to say about it. There it is, landfall very soon. According to this model run here, that's a landfall in Halong Bay at approximately... trying to figure out time zones here again. It would be at just after 3 p.m. Local time, according to this forecast. Again, southern side, the strongest. Look how quickly it dies off, though. I'm still not convinced it's going to do that. And then look at this, another system later on there. This isn't Yagi. This is the 10th of September. Something that forms out of almost nothing in that area, becoming a brief tropical storm. Circling around a little bit. We do get storms like those sometimes. Okay, back to the rest of the Western Pacific. Once again, we're watching this extremely broad area here. Something trying to find a proper center, something to tighten up as we look out for our next tropical cyclone. Does it manage to do it? Well, it has an attempt there. Doesn't get the winds up. Slams into China. Behind it then, that next system, that other one that we have significant concerns about. There it is moving through Guam. Actually not a typhoon, just a tropical storm. Then it strengthens afterwards. You may remember last time on our bulletin there was an enormous storm in the northwestern Pacific. And that one isn't it. But there it is, a strong typhoon there, again making headway towards Japan. Again, Shanshan vibes on that. I said that last night too. A little bit like Shanshan there, but not as strong. And then behind it, this is what we had, that enormous typhoon last time. What will it show this time? Again, a huge storm that tries to wrap itself together. Really, it's not done a very good job. A right mess, actually, into Taiwan, and then shriveling up as it does so into China. So, who knows what's going to happen with that? It's still a very long way out on the models. North Indian Ocean, looking out for that brief spin up there in the Bay of Bengal. Again, trying but failing on that particular model run, moving inland, probably near Kolkata, actually, on that forecast. And in the 7-day period as well, maybe a surface low there in the southern Indian Ocean. Possible opportunity for that, but doesn't look like it will happen. A cursory look at the South Pacific. Big extratropical cyclone there, but nothing else. South Atlantic. Quite a few very large. Look how large some of these extratropical cyclones are down there. Some really huge systems. This is normal, but you can get some enormous storms down there. And up in the Mediterranean, could there be a surprise? The modelling, at least the GFS, is saying no. So let's quickly take a look at rainfall expectations then for that 7-day period. And here it is once again. Very high amounts of rain for parts of Vietnam, all along the coast there. Maximums out at sea, 32 inches, 800 millimeters. On the coast, about 24 inches, maybe higher in some areas actually. So getting close to 700 millimeters there. Still very high amounts. Pushing 500 millimeters well inland. In Hanoi, maybe 350 millimeters, maybe 400. And well inland there, still getting some significant amounts over 300. But look at this, still more rainfall along the west coast of the Philippines as well. A few spots there getting up and above 300 millimeters, 12 inches. And on some of the Babayan Island group, up and above 400 millimeters of rainfall there. And you can start to see the big rain swath of that next storm too. And that will be a plague on the Mariana Islands. You might be able to see Guam. It's here. 12 inches of rain there in the next 7 days, mainly from that next system. And further north, a few, maybe Saipan getting up to 14 inches. And then on some of these areas, they're up to 18 inches. Again, getting up towards 500 millimeters. And still down towards here as well in the Micronesian Islands. High amounts of rainfall here too. So indications showing that that potential next storm looks like it's going to be a very wet one. But that is the GFS model right there. That was certainly interesting. What do you guys think of what we've just seen?
I mean, I find it very interesting, and really, I'm just thinking of that Atlantic system, to be honest. Of course, I do want to point out the Western Pacific systems. Those do seem moderately interesting, especially with the track of that system near Guam, which might become similar to Shanshan. However, I do notice that Atlantic system, it might have that capability of becoming a major hurricane. But, of course, that is way too far out for me to predict that. However, it is possible to get systems like that in September, so I wouldn't rule it out. And this is September, after all. You do get those major hurricanes quite often, so that might be the system that we have to watch. But it is only at 20% right now, so we have to decide if it's even going to form yet.
Oh, I think there's a decent chance for it next week. Not straight away.
I think there is, too. I think there is too, and maybe it should be higher than 20%. But...
Well, I mean, it's whether
It is far out.
It's whether it happens in 7 days or not, and uncertainty about those potential other systems with it. So we've given it 40% though.
Yeah, I think that's a good estimate.
So that it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. Once again, we're looking at radar imagery of Yagi right now, and if you're a bit confused as to why it looks like it's got 3 eyes or some really crazy mess of vortices, it's just the radar. It's just a bit messed up. What's happened there is that there's several different radar sites and they've not been positioned correctly. It's some sign of a software glitch there, which looks like there's 3 eye walls and eyes all swirling together there. Well, it is just the one, but it looks like it's closing up quite nicely right there, looking quite impressive. Let's go back to some of this satellite imagery, some newer frames there. Looks like the eye might be popping back out a little bit more again. Let's switch back to the Zaire imagery and see if we can get some new frames on this. Just a second whilst we grab that. This is the latest imagery. This is the enhancement I prefer these days. Well, hasn't been showing much more on that. Just make sure this is up to date. Oh, there's some new frames. Okay. So again, popping out a little bit better there. Certainly holding intensity, I would say, at least. It is probably still 120 miles per hour right now, maybe even higher. Let's see if we've got some more comments and questions here right now as well. There's a question there about whatever happened to Leapy. Well, it was never going to last very long up there, that's for sure. Do we have any season analogues for the Western Pacific? I did at the start of the year, but we haven't been keeping up with that info. I will tell you what the best analog was at the start of the year, and it was, well, in June, and the best analogs at that time were 2021 and 1966. Both interesting years in different ways, weren't they? 1966 had some tremendous storms, in fact. Some more questions then. After Yagi, the Guam system could be becoming something, and the track looks scary, similar to Moranti, they say. Well, I'm not sure it's going to be like that. C4 Elan says, I have a question for Yagi. I don't think Yagi's able to respond, though. What are the conditions expected to be like in Hainan, Da Nang? So that's quite a bit further south. Well, I would imagine that things aren't going to be too bad for you. That even the rainfall charts are not showing very much. So I don't think you are really going to be impacted. As a matter of fact, just looking at satellite right now, the storm has already made its closest pass to Da Nang. You are just near the edge of the cloud cover as well. So it's actually going to clear up a little bit later today, I think, as far as I can tell, as the storm continues to move west. Any other comments from our team right now? I'm conscious that you might want to have more to say here.
I'm not really sure, actually. I need to think. I'm very tired. It's 2 AM.
It's been a long few weeks, hasn't it, though, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what this season is almost reminding me of? Besides the Japanese systems that we've been getting? I feel like it almost reminds me of 1989 a little bit, because it kind of reminds me, because with that, we had that Taiwan system. We also had that system that made landfall on Hainan Island or close to it. And we haven't gone in that Philippine system yet. Yes, Sarah. Sarah was the storm that made landfall in Taiwan.
Well, most storms, when they approach Taiwan as a major, they just they go for a loop or something. They just go for some funky track. They just decide to head south.
Well, they don't all do that.
Most of them.
You've been
I said
scarred for
most.
life after gaming, right?
Yes, I have actually. That live stream was
Yeah.
crazy.
Okay, we're nearly finished then. Let's give you a last position update before we go off the air. We'll be doing on this day in just a second, and then we'll be redirecting you to our automated stream, which has been running all week as well. Hopefully it's been of good use. Just trying to get a position estimate right now, and the latest we have is that the storm is still moving pretty much due west. It is 48 kilometers from Hainan Island, one of those islands to the east of Haiphong. From Haiphong itself, it is 91 kilometers. Haiphong 119. Hanoi just 208. So pretty small distances that we're talking about here. And if it keeps moving at the current trajectory, let me just double check what that trajectory has been, just to make sure I'm right on this. But it looks like the storm has been moving just slightly west-northwest, but not enough to pass north of some of these cities. As a matter of fact, looking at the latest projection, unless it does shift north, the eye of the storm will actually now be passing south of Haiphong and Hanoi. So you may actually be getting the northern side of the storm or the eye itself. I think actually what's most likely is that those cities will probably get the eye of the storm, and that's going to be pretty remarkable. And certainly Hanoi will never have seen a storm of this intensity pass directly over the city. There have been a couple of Category 2s in the area, Frankie of 1996 and Crovan in 2003, that have been nearby, but they didn't actually pass over the city at Category 2 intensity. And that's Category 2s that we're talking about. This could well be a Category 3 landfall. So obviously prepare accordingly. It is going to be a pretty dangerous storm. Evacuate if you feel like your place will be unsafe. Obviously, I'm sure this information will have been put out over the last few days as we've been watching this storm get closer and closer. At this point, I suppose it's more time to hunker down. But it's certainly going to be a powerful storm here. There could be some serious flooding. There could be serious structural damage. And obviously along the coast, a really substantial storm surge as well, as Jack was saying. Potentially 5 meters, right?
Yeah, essentially.
What was the source for that?
I saw earlier on Windy, and I was checking it with other websites and everything.
I mean, it sounds plausible.
I don't know how, I was very confused. That's why I went and double checked, but it was forecasting 5 meters, and that was where the storm makes landfall, anywhere north of where the storm makes landfall. I think it was about 40 miles north of where the storm makes landfall, and that's obvious. It'll be north of where the storm makes landfall. As for any other northern hemisphere cyclone, it's going to be to the side of the eye that has the stronger winds going onto land from the sea.
All right. Well, we've run over a bit here, but I'd like to thank Jack and Maury for your commentary during this hour as well. Let's take a look at what happened on this day.
I know this.
It was September 7th, 1974, when we had a very powerful Hurricane Carmen getting near its second peak, nearly a Category 5 actually, at the very end of the 7th as it approached Louisiana with some real fury there. We also had Typhoon Shirley in the Western Pacific near Japan. Trix had died off over land, very close to where Yagi's going, and 2 depressions in the Atlantic, 11 and 13. Well, back to today then. The next name in the Atlantic is Francine. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Ileana. And in the Central Pacific, it's Iona. We've established that Yagi reached Category 5 intensity the other day. Leapy also happened, so the next name is Babinka. In the North Indian Ocean, the next name now is Dana. 45 storms so far around the world in 2024. Still a little bit below what would be expected. The Australian region, next name is Robin. Southwest Indian Ocean is Ansha. South Pacific is Pitta. I'm on vacation after this, so there'll be no more tropical weather bulletins from me until the 22nd. But we'll have updates on the channel.
Today.